Hey everybody, it's time once again for a 2021-2022 season preview, and today we're going to be looking at a team that was last in the NHL last season and looks like they very well could be last in the NHL again this year, and that of course is the Buffalo Sabres. Going to try not to go too hard on them, just get this over with, but it looks like it's going to be a really, really long year up in Buffalo, and this organization, again, seems to be completely starting from scratch, starting a whole new rebuild. And, man, I just feel so bad for Sabres fans. They deserve much better than this. Team hasn't made the playoffs in 10 years, and it doesn't look like that's going to be changing anytime soon. So, I'm sorry, Sabres fans, but we've got to do it. Let's take a look. Starting with last year, before we look forward, we have to look back. And like I said, last in the NHL, 15-34-7 last season, only 15 wins in 56 games. And honestly, this year, I think even in an 82-game season, I think they'll be lucky to win 20 games this season. Their offense was absolutely terrible, 2.39 goals for per game. Really bad number there. But somehow their defense was even worse, and they gave up 3.5 goals per game last year. Just absolutely brutal. Their one bright spot was the power play, 21% on the power play, which is actually pretty good. So there's something to hang your hat on, Sabres. But their penalty kill was not good, just 77.7% on the PK, pretty well under 80% there, and not a great number. So obviously pretty clear why they were a last place team last season. They didn't really do anything well except for the power play. They made a bunch of moves this offseason. We look at the additions and subtractions, and they also added quite a few draft picks as well, which, again, they're pretty much going into another rebuild. If we look at the subtractions, Linus Weisbach, their starting goaltender, left in free agency. Sam Reinhart was traded to Florida. Rasmus Ristolainen was traded to Philadelphia. Jake McCabe left in free agency. Will Borgen was taken by Seattle in the expansion draft. Riley Sheahan, Tobias Reeder, Carter Hutton, and Matt Irwin, all free agents as well, and no longer with the team. On the addition side of things, they didn't really pick up any big players. Again, I think their biggest additions were the draft picks that they acquired this offseason, but they did bring in Robert Haig from Philadelphia in the Ristolainen deal. They added Will Butcher from New Jersey. They signed goaltenders Craig Anderson and Aaron Dell to replace Ullmark and Hutton. Mark Pysyk returns. He was originally a Buffalo Sabre and then went away to a couple different teams for a while, but is now back. They signed forward Vinny Hinostroza. He's a depth guy that's kind of bounced around a little bit. And depth forward John Hayden as well comes into the lineup, but obviously much bigger names on the subtraction side than on the addition side. And it was more about the addition of draft picks for Buffalo this year. One name that you do not see on the subtraction side that we all thought there was a good chance we would is Jack Eichel, but he was not traded this offseason, at least so far, and very bad situation brewing there between Eichel and the Sabres, and we'll talk more about that when we get into the roster. So now it's time to look at my projected roster for the Buffalo Sabres this season, and well, right off the bat, you don't see Jack Eichel. Well, that's because he is on IR still. He did not pass his physical at the start of training camp, so he will start the season on LTIR. And I honestly think he has played his last game as a Buffalo Sabre in one way or the other. Obviously, they haven't traded him yet, but I just can't imagine him wearing a Sabres uniform again. Obviously, they took the captaincy away because he's not going to be playing, and they haven't been able to get a deal done yet, and it's because of their astronomical asking price, but I really think they need to drop that asking price and just get him out of there. just everything that's happened between him and the organization, it's really turned into a complete disaster. Their star player, their face of the franchise, wants out, is injured. There's been all the issues with, getting the surgery versus not getting the surgery, and the team wanting one and him wanting the other, and that's been driven a big, crack in their relationship. And it's just the whole Jack Eichel situation has turned into an absolute disaster for the Buffalo Sabres. And honestly, I think they need to just take what they can get for him, get him out of there. And again, this team is completely starting from scratch once again. And it's going to be another full rebuild coming for the Sabres, because when you look at this roster, holy cow, it is not good. Up front, you've got Victor Olofsson, Jeff Skinner, Kyle Okposo, Dylan Cousins, Casey Middlestat, Cody Eakin, Zemgus Girgensons, Tage Thompson, Anders Bjork, Vinny Hinostroza, Rasmus Asplund, John Hayden, and Drake Caggiula. On the back end, you've got Rasmus Dahlin, and it's a wonder he hasn't asked for a trade yet either. I honestly, if I'm Olofsson, if I'm Dahlin, I would want out. I mean, I would not want to have to go through what you're going to go through with this team for the next few years, but they're still there. Dahlin on the back end, Colin Miller, Will Butcher, Henry Jokiharju, Robert Haig, Jacob Bryson, and then depth guys Mark Pysyk and Brandon Davidson. I think they're likely to carry 13 forwards and 8 defensemen, but it could be 14 forwards and 7D. But I just think the guys that they have up front are going to be easier to send up and down from the, you can just call them up if you need them. Whereas on the back end, like Pysyk and Davidson would have to go through waivers, and well, they're probably not going to get taken, but if there was another team out there who needed to add to their defense depth, maybe they could. I think it's easier to carry 8D and not really have to worry about it unless you really run into injury problems on the back end, and then their forwards they can send up and down, especially their depth guys like McInnes and Ruotsalainen and Weisbach and such. So, goaltending, it's going to be a tandem of Craig Anderson and Aaron Dell. And, that's definitely one of the worst goaltending tandems in the NHL without a doubt this year. No question about that. As far as depth goes, up front, they've got Ruotsalainen. Jack Quinn, I think, probably sees NHL games this year. He's looked pretty decent in the preseason and in the rookie tournament. Ryan McInnes they brought in. He's kind of just an organizational depth forward. And then Linus Weisbach coming in, played at the University of Wisconsin. Pretty excited to see him. I think there's a good chance he plays some NHL games this year. Probably starts out in the AHL, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see him up with the big club. He's a little bit older because he played in college and played all 4 years in college. So, it shouldn't be too long before we see him get a look at the NHL. On the back end, outside of those top 8 that I have making the roster, there's really not much on the back end here. Casey Fitzgerald, 24-year-old that they re-signed, he'll probably be a call-up if, they really get into their defense depth. And then Matthias Samuelsson, he's a young guy. He could be called up as well, but will very likely be starting down in the AHL. And then goaltender, Dustin Tokarski, I think should probably be the third goalie. They have Urho-Pekka Luukkonen, but I don't think you want to subject your rookie goaltender to what he would be subjected to playing at the NHL level this year with this team in front of him. I think it's much better to let him play down in the AHL, be the starter in the AHL, develop, have hopefully a good season, and don't really make him worry about having to be called up and having to play behind this team. Anderson and Dell obviously going to be your regular guys, but if anything happens to those two, I think you just throw Tokarski in there, and he's a veteran guy in his 30s. He can take the beating, so to say, and just it's just not looking good for this team. So that's Buffalo. Obviously, not a great roster, looking like they are very well in the hunt for the first overall pick again this season. They just got it last year and took Owen Power. He made the very smart decision to go back to the University of Michigan, and they could very well be getting Shane Wright in the first overall pick again this season. I also think that Arizona and Anaheim are in the running for that, but Buffalo has certainly got a good shot, as this roster is pretty brutal when you look at it. And like I said earlier, I think they're going to be lucky to win 20 games this season. It is not looking good for them in the Atlantic Division, but it is what it is for the Sabres. Again, I feel so bad for Sabres fans. They do not deserve to be subjected to this, but it looks like another restart on the rebuild for Buffalo this year. And God, they've got to get something for Eichel and just get that situation resolved. And they're going to be starting over as far as goaltending goes. They're going to be starting over. I mean, really, they have Dahlin on the back end, and after that, I mean, it's a bunch of third pair guys. Forwards wise, I mean, I like Dylan Cousins. I like Dylan Cousins. I think Tage Thompson can be a decent bottom six guy. If he's in your top six, you've got big problems. Obviously, Victor Olofsson's a good player. Skinner and Okposo are on terrible contracts. Middlestad's never turned into what he was supposed to. And then you've got a bunch of depth guys other than that. I mean, they really have no second line. They have no true first line center. They really don't have a true second line center at this point. It just is what it is. It's not great. But that's the Buffalo Sabres. Really sorry to their fans. It is going to be a long, long year for them, in my opinion. And maybe they can get another first overall pick. And if they can get, Shane Wright, and if they can, obviously have Power from last year, they can maybe kind of kickstart this new rebuild a little bit. But boy, is it not looking good for them winning games at the NHL level this season. But with that, like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, links to our Patreon, merchandise store, donation link, and channel memberships are down in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.